The rope burns on her wrists were still bleeding when Marshal Cole Walker kicked open the door of the abandoned shack 3 miles outside Silver City, New Mexico, his hand already reaching for the Colt at his hip before he registered what he was seeing in the dim afternoon light filtering through the broken slats. A woman sat bound to a chair in the center of the single room, her dark hair matted with dried blood, her dress torn at the shoulder, and her green eyes blazing with a mixture of terror and defiance that made something twist hard in Cole's chest. He had been tracking the Murphy gang for 2 weeks across the New Mexico territory, following a trail of robberies and violence that stretched from Las Cruces to the Arizona border. But he had not expected to find this. The outlaws had clearly abandoned their captive here to die in the summer heat of 1882, leaving her without water or hope of rescue in a structure that looked ready to collapse at any moment. "Easy now," Cole said, holstering his weapon and moving forward with his hands visible, his voice low and steady like he was gentling a spooked horse. "I'm Marshal Walker. I'm going to cut you loose." The woman's eyes tracked his every movement as he pulled his knife from his boot, the blade catching the light as he moved behind her to saw through the thick hemp rope that bound her wrist to the chair. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and he could see the way her whole body trembled despite the stifling heat inside the shack. When the rope finally gave way, she sagged forward, and Cole caught her shoulders to keep her from pitching face first onto the dirt floor. "How long?" he asked, moving around to kneel in front of her and begin working on the ropes around her ankles. 3 days, she whispered, her voice cracked and raw from thirst. "Maybe 4. I lost track." Cole cursed under his breath and finished cutting through the last of her bonds, then pulled his canteen from his belt and held it to her lips. "Slow," he warned as she reached for it with shaking hands. "Just small sips or you'll be sick." She nodded and drank carefully, her eyes closing as the water touched her parched lips. Cole found himself studying her face in the dim light, noting the elegant bone structure beneath the dirt and bruises, the strength in the set of her jaw, the way her hands steadied themselves even as her body continued to shake with exhaustion and shock. She was younger than he had first thought, probably not more than 24 or 25. And there was something about the way she held herself that spoke of education and refinement despite her current circumstances. "Can you stand?" he asked when she had drunk her fill. "I think so." She braced her hands on the arms of the chair and pushed herself upright, swaying dangerously as her legs threatened to give out beneath her. Cole caught her around the waist, steadying her against his side, and felt the way she stiffened at the contact before forcing herself to relax. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "I give you my word." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, her green eyes searching his face for something he could not name. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly and allowed him to guide her toward the door. "My name is Katherine," she said, "Katherine Hayes." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Hayes, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Cole helped her outside into the blazing New Mexico sun, squinting against the sudden brightness as he scanned the surrounding scrubland for any sign of the Murphy gang. His bay gelding stood ground-tied 20 yards away, and he whistled softly to bring the horse closer. "Can you ride?" Katherine looked at the tall horse with an expression that might have been trepidation or simply exhaustion. "I can ride," she said, "but I'm not certain I can mount without assistance." "No shame in that after what you have been through." Cole swung up into the saddle first, then reached down to clasp her forearm and pull her up behind him. She settled onto the horse's rump with her arms wrapped around his waist, and he could feel the way she leaned heavily against his back, her remaining strength clearly fading fast. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. Can you hold on that long?" "I will manage," Katherine said, but her voice was already growing faint. Cole urged his horse into an easy lope, keeping the pace steady but not too jarring, one hand on the reins and the other covering Katherine's clasped fingers at his waist to make sure she did not slip. He could feel her growing heavier against him as consciousness began to fade, and he found himself talking to keep her awake, telling her about the country they were passing through, about Silver City and its silver mines that had given the town its name, about anything and everything that might keep her tethered to the waking world until he could get her somewhere safe. The Walker Ranch came into view as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The main house, a sturdy adobe structure with a wide porch and a red tile roof that his father had built 30 years ago when this was still wild Apache country. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant his housekeeper Maria was there preparing supper, and Cole felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as he guided his horse into the yard and pulled up near the porch steps. "Maria," he called out as he dismounted and reached up to ease Katherine down from the horse. She came into his arms like a rag doll, barely conscious, and he lifted her easily against his chest. "Maria, I need help!" The front door burst open and Maria Gonzalez came rushing out, wiping her hands on her apron, her dark eyes going wide as she took in the sight of the half-conscious woman in Cole's arms. Maria was in her 50s, round and motherly and fierce as a she's-bear when protecting those she considered under her care, and she had been keeping house for Cole since his father died 5 years ago. She took one look at Katherine's condition and started issuing orders in rapid-fire Spanish before switching to English. "Bring her to the guest room. I will heat water and fetch clean cloths. That girl needs a doctor." "I will ride back to town for Doc Harrison as soon as I get her settled," Cole said, carrying Katherine through the front door and down the hall to the guest bedroom. He laid her carefully on the quilt-covered bed, noting the way her eyes fluttered open for just a moment before closing again. "Miss Hayes? Can you hear me?" "Cold," Katherine murmured, though the room was warm. "So cold?" "Shock," Maria said from the doorway, her arms full of blankets. "Cover her up and then go for the doctor. I will take care of her until you return." Cole nodded and pulled the blankets up over Katherine's shivering form, then forced himself to step back and let Maria take over. He knew the older woman was more than capable of tending to their unexpected guest, but something about leaving Katherine in this vulnerable state made every protective instinct he possessed rise up in fierce rebellion. He pushed the feeling aside and headed for the door, pausing only long enough to grab a fresh horse from the corral before riding hard back toward Silver City. The sun had fully set by the time he returned with Doc Harrison, an elderly man with silver hair and steady hands who had been practicing medicine in Silver City since before the war between the states. The doctor said nothing during the ride back to the ranch, but Cole could see the concern in his weathered face as they dismounted and hurried inside to where Maria was keeping vigil at Katherine's bedside. "She woke up once while you were gone," Maria reported quietly as Doc Harrison began his examination. "Long enough to drink some broth and tell me her name. Then she fell back into this sleep." Cole stood in the doorway and watched as the doctor worked, cleaning and bandaging the rope burns on Katherine's wrists and ankles, checking her for signs of serious injury or fever, asking Maria questions in a low voice about what she had observed. Finally, Doc Harrison straightened up and turned to face Cole with an expression that was equal parts relieved and stern. "She will live," the doctor said, "but it was a near thing. Another day or two in that heat without water, and we would be having a very different conversation. As it is, she needs rest, proper food, and time to heal. Those rope burns will pain her for a while, and she has some bruising that suggests rough handling, but I see no signs of serious assault." The last was said with a meaningful look that made Cole's jaw tighten with understanding. "How long before she is well enough to travel?" Cole asked. Doc Harrison shook his head. "At least a week, maybe 2. She needs to regain her strength before undertaking any kind of journey." "Where does she need to go?" "I do not know yet," Cole admitted. "I found her tied up in an abandoned shack out past Copper Canyon. The Murphy gang must have taken her, though I do not know why or from where." The doctor's expression darkened. "The Murphy gang? Those animals should have been hanged years ago. Well, young lady is lucky you found her when you did, Marshal. You likely saved her life." He packed up his medical bag and headed for the door, pausing to rest a hand on Cole's shoulder. "Take care of her, and when she's well enough to talk, find out what happened. If the Murphy gang is taking hostages now, every woman in the territory is at risk." Cole saw the doctor out and then returned to the guest room, where Maria was adjusting the blankets around Catherine's sleeping form. The older woman looked up at him with knowing eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "She is pretty, this one," Maria observed in Spanish. "That has nothing to do with anything," Cole replied in the same language, but he could feel heat rising in his face. Maria made a non-committal sound that clearly indicated she did not believe him for a moment. "I will sit with her tonight. You need to eat and rest. You have been tracking those outlaws for 2 weeks with barely any sleep." Cole wanted to argue, but he knew Maria was right. He was exhausted, and he would be no use to Katherine or anyone else if he collapsed from fatigue. "Wake me if there is any change," he said, then reluctantly left the room and headed for the kitchen. He ate the meal Maria had prepared earlier without tasting it, his mind replaying the moment he had opened that shack door and seen Katherine bound and helpless in the darkness. The rage he had felt in that instant still simmered beneath his breastbone, a hot coal of fury directed at the men who had done this to her. The Murphy gang had committed plenty of crimes over the years, but kidnapping and attempted murder added new urgency to his hunt for them. After forcing down enough food to satisfy Maria's exacting standards, Cole retreated to his father's old office and spent an hour going through wanted posters and reports, trying to piece together the gang's movements over the past month. There were 5 of them. Jack Murphy, the leader, a cold-blooded killer with a quick draw and quicker temper, his younger brother Sean, who was mean as a snake but not quite as smart, Tom Bradley, an ex-soldier who had deserted during the Apache campaigns, and 2 others whose names changed depending on which report Cole read. They had been operating in the New Mexico territory for almost 3 years, and Cole had been tracking them on and off for most of that time, always a few steps behind, always arriving too late to catch them in the act. But now they had made a mistake. Now they had taken Katherine Hayes, and that gave Cole something he had not had before, a witness. If Katherine could tell him where she had been taken from and what the gang wanted with her, it might be the break he needed to finally bring them to justice. Assuming she survived long enough to tell him anything. Cole pushed that dark thought aside and forced himself to go to bed, though sleep was a long time coming. He lay awake in his room listening to the sounds of the night, the distant howl of coyotes and the closer rustle of wind through the cottonwoods that lined the creek behind the house, and found his thoughts returning again and again to the woman sleeping down the hall. There had been something in her eyes when she looked at him, something fierce and unbroken despite her ordeal, and Cole recognized it because he saw the same thing in his own mirror every morning, a refusal to be beaten down by the cruelties of the world. He finally drifted off near dawn and slept heavily until Maria woke him with the news that Katherine was awake and asking to see him. Cole dressed quickly and made his way to the guest room, knocking softly before entering to find Katherine sitting propped up against the pillows, her dark hair brushed and braided over one shoulder, and her face scrubbed clean to reveal the full extent of the bruising along her jaw and cheekbone. She looked impossibly young and fragile in the morning light, but her eyes were clear and focused as they met his. "Marshal Walker," she said, her voice still rough but stronger than it had been the day before. "Maria tells me I have you to thank for rescuing me." "Just doing my job, Miss Hayes." Cole pulled up a chair and sat down beside the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was trampled by a team of horses," Katherine admitted, with a wan smile. "But Maria has been taking excellent care of me. She tells me I have been asleep for almost a full day." "Your body needed the rest. Doc Harrison says you came very close to dying out there." Katherine's expression sobered, and she looked down at her bandaged wrists, flexing her fingers slowly. "Yes, I thought I was going to die. I had made my peace with it by the 3rd day." She looked back up at him, and Cole saw the shimmer of tears in her eyes that she blinked away fiercely. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me back my life." "You are welcome." Cole leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Miss Hayes, I know you are still recovering, but I need to ask you some questions about what happened. The men who did this to you, they are dangerous outlaws, and anything you can tell me might help me catch them before they hurt someone else." Katherine nodded slowly. I will tell you everything I remember, though I'm afraid it may not be much help. They kept sacks over my head most of the time. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled in her lap. I was traveling from Santa Fe to Silver City on the stage 3 weeks ago. I'd been teaching at a school for girls in Santa Fe, but the school closed when the headmistress died, and I received a letter offering me a position at the school here in Silver City. The stage was attacked 2 days out from Santa Fe in the mountains north of here. There were 5 men, all masked. They shot the driver and the guard, then dragged all the passengers out onto the road. Cole felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral, not wanting to interrupt her story. Katherine continued, her gaze fixed on something beyond the walls of the room, clearly seeing the events play out again in her mind. They took everything of value from the other passengers, then let them go. But they kept me. I do not know why. One of them, the leader, I think, said I would fetch a good price in Mexico, that I was pretty enough to make them rich. Her voice wavered on the last words, and she paused to collect herself. They tied my hands and put me on a horse behind one of them. We rode for days, always moving south and west. They barely spoke to me except to give orders, and they kept me tied up at night. Then about 5 or 6 days ago, I do not remember exactly, they stopped at that shack. The leader said they were too close to Silver City and the law was getting hot on their trail, that they needed to move fast and I would just slow them down. One of the others wanted to kill me right there, but the leader said that was too risky, that a gunshot might bring someone running. So they tied me to that chair and left me there to die slowly. Cole had heard enough stories of frontier brutality in his years as a lawman that few things could shock him anymore, but the casual cruelty of leaving a woman to die of thirst and exposure made his blood run cold. Can you describe any of them? Anything at all that might help me identify them? Katherine closed her eyes, thinking. The leader had a scar on his left hand, between his thumb and forefinger. I saw it when he grabbed my arm. And his voice, he had an Irish accent. Not as strong as some, but it was there. One of the others called him Murphy. Jack Murphy, Cole said grimly. I have been hunting him for 2 years. He and his brother Sean are wanted in 3 territories. The fact that they let you see that scar and hear his name suggests they really did intend for you to die out there. He stood up and began pacing the room, his mind already working through the implications. You said they were heading south toward the border? That is what I gathered from what little I heard them say. They talked about Mesilla and El Paso, about meeting someone who would pay good money for stolen horses and cattle. Katherine watched him pace, her expression thoughtful. You are going after them, are you not? That is my job, Cole said simply, but not until I know you are safe and recovered. Doc Harrison says you need at least a week before you are strong enough to travel, and I would not feel right about leaving you here alone. I have Maria, Katherine pointed out, and I'm sure there are ranch hands who work here. You do not need to delay your pursuit on my account, Marshal. Those men should be brought to justice before they hurt anyone else. Those men are not going anywhere in a hurry, Cole countered. They think you are dead, which means they think they are safe. Let them get comfortable. Let them drop their guard. It will make them easier to catch when I do go after them. He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. And truth be told, Miss Hayes, I would like to make sure you are fully recovered before I leave. You have been through a terrible ordeal, and the least I can do is see that you are safe and well before I ride out. Katherine held his gaze for a long moment, and Cole saw something shift in her expression, a softening around the edges that had not been there before. That is very kind of you, Marshal. More than kind. I am not accustomed to such consideration. Then you have been keeping company with the wrong sort of men, Cole said before he could stop himself, then felt his ears heat up at the implication of his words. I just meant that any decent man would do the same. A small smile tugged at the corner of Katherine's mouth, the first real smile he had seen from her. I think you are selling yourself short, Marshal Walker. But I will not argue with you if you insist on staying. The truth is, I would feel safer knowing you were nearby. I keep thinking I hear their voices, that they have come back to finish what they started." "That is natural after what you went through," Cole assured her. "But I promise you, Miss Hayes, you are safe here. This ranch has good men working it, and I will post someone outside your window at night if it will help you rest easier. No one is going to hurt you again, not while I draw breath." The vehemence in his own voice surprised him, but Katherine did not seem to find it strange. She simply nodded and settled back against the pillows, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Thank you, Marshal. I believe you." Over the next week, Cole found himself spending more and more time in Katherine's company as she slowly regained her strength. Each morning he would check on her before riding out to oversee the ranch work, and each evening he would return to find her sitting up in bed or, as the days passed, in the chair by the window reading books from his father's library or talking with Maria in a combination of English and halting Spanish that made the older woman beam with delight. Katherine proved to be intelligent and well-educated, with opinions on everything from literature to politics to the ongoing Apache troubles that had plagued the territory for years. She spoke French and adequate Spanish, could quote Shakespeare and Dante with equal facility, and had a dry wit that caught Cole off guard more than once and made him laugh in a way he had not laughed in years. She was also, he discovered, surprisingly knowledgeable about horses and ranching, having grown up on her family's small farm in Kansas before heading east to attend a teacher's college in Missouri. "My father always wanted sons," Katherine told him one evening as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. She was wearing one of Maria's dresses, altered to fit her slighter frame, and her dark hair was loose around her shoulders in a way that made Cole's mouth go dry. But he got 3 daughters instead, and he decided that if God was not going to send him boys, he would simply raise his girls to do everything boys could do. So my sisters and I learned to ride and rope and shoot alongside our lessons in needlework and piano. "Sounds like a wise man," Cole said, leaning back in his chair and propping his boots up on the porch rail. "Where is your family now?" Katherine's expression grew distant. "My parents died of cholera when I was 16. My older sister Margaret married a shopkeeper in Topeka and has 4 children now. My younger sister Ellen married a soldier and moved to Fort Laramie. We write when we can, but we are all scattered now. After my parents died, I went to live with an aunt in Missouri who paid for me to attend the teacher's college. When I graduated, I found positions where I could and tried to save money." She glanced at him sideways. The position in Silver City was supposed to be a new start, better paid than I was getting in Santa Fe, and a chance to save enough to perhaps open my own school someday. "That is still possible," Cole said. "The teaching position is still waiting for you if you want it. I spoke with the school board chairman, Mr. Carson, and explained what happened. He said the job is yours whenever you are ready to start." Katherine turned to look at him fully, surprise and gratitude written across her face. "You did that for me? Marshal, I do not know what to say. Thank you." "Cole," he said impulsively, "when we are not in town, you should call me Cole. I think we have moved past the need for formal titles. Do you not agree?" "Cole?" Katherine repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. "Then you should call me Katherine. Or Kate, if you prefer. My father always called me Kate." "Kate suits you," Cole said, and meant it. The name had a directness, a strength that matched the woman before him. "Kate it is, then." They fell into a comfortable silence after that, watching the last light fade from the sky and the stars begin to emerge in the vast darkness overhead. Cole found himself acutely aware of Katherine's presence beside him, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the soft sound of her breathing, the faint scent of the lavender soap Maria had given her. He had not felt this way about a woman in years, not since Sarah had died of fever back in Texas before the war, taking with her all the dreams of home and family he had once held dear. But Katherine Hayes was awakening something in him that he had thought long dead, a longing for connection and companionship that went beyond the simple satisfaction of bringing outlaws to justice. He found himself thinking about what it would be like to come home to her every evening, to sit on this porch and share the events of the day, to wake up beside her every morning and see her smile at him across the breakfast table. It was a dangerous line of thinking for a man who had spent the last decade married to his badge, but Cole could not seem to help himself. "Cole?" Katherine's voice pulled him from his reverie. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "Nothing important," he lied, then decided that was cowardly and amended his answer. "Actually, I was thinking about how glad I am that I found you when I did. Not just because I saved your life, though I'm grateful for that, but because meeting you has been good for me. I have spent too many years alone, I think, and I had forgotten what it was like to enjoy someone's company." Katherine was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft and uncertain in a way he had not heard from her before. "I have enjoyed your company as well, Cole. More than I expected to, if I'm being honest. When those men left me in that shack, I thought I would never trust anyone again, that I would spend the rest of my life flinching at shadows and seeing threats around every corner. But you have made me feel safe. You have treated me with kindness and respect when you could have simply dropped me at the hotel in town and washed your hands of the whole situation. That means more to me than I can properly express." Cole felt something expand in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. "You are not a problem to be solved, Kate. You are a woman who has been through hell and deserves a chance to heal and find her footing again. If I can help with that, even in some small way, then I am glad to do it." "It is not a small way," Katherine insisted. "You have given me back hope, Cole. Do not underestimate the value of that gift." They talked long into the night, trading stories about their pasts and their dreams for the future, finding common ground in unexpected places, and laughing over shared observations about the quirks of frontier life. When Maria finally shooed them both off to bed near midnight, Cole went to sleep with a smile on his face, and Katherine's laugh still echoing in his ears. The next morning brought an unwelcome reminder of the world beyond the ranch when one of Cole's deputies, a young man named Tom Bradley, not to be confused with the outlaw of the same name, rode out from Silver City with news that 3 homesteads had been raided in the past week, their livestock stolen and one man killed when he tried to fight back. The description of the raiders matched the Murphy gang, which meant they had not fled to Mexico after all but were still operating in the area. Cole listened to the deputy's report with growing anger, his jaw tight and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Katherine had come out onto the porch when she heard voices and now stood listening with a pale face as Tom described the raids and their aftermath. "I need to go after them," Cole said when the deputy finished. "They are getting bolder, more violent. If we do not stop them soon, more people are going to die." "I understand," Katherine said quietly. "You have stayed here long enough on my account. I am well enough now to manage, and Maria will take care of me." Cole wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she still needed more time to recover, but he knew she was right. He had a duty to protect the people of this territory, and that meant tracking down the Murphy gang before they killed anyone else. "I will be back as soon as I can," he promised. "A week at most." "Be careful," Katherine said, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart skip. "I would like you to come back in one piece." "I intend to," Cole assured her. He turned to give instructions to Tom about organizing a posse, but found his attention kept drifting back to where Katherine stood on the porch, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Finally, he gave up, pretending he was not completely distracted, and walked back over to her. "Kate, I need to know that you will be safe while I'm gone. Promise me you will stay here at the ranch, that you will not go into town or anywhere else without an armed escort." "I promise," Katherine said. "I have no desire to make myself an easy target, but Cole, you have to promise me something too." "What is that?" "Promise me you will not take any unnecessary risks going after these men. They are killers, and they have already tried to murder me once. I do not want you to end up dead because you were thinking about protecting me instead of protecting yourself." Cole reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm and the fragility of her bones beneath his fingers. "I promise to be careful, but Kate, I have been hunting outlaws for a long time. This is what I do, and I am good at it. Trust me to know how to handle myself." "I do trust you," Katherine said, That is why I'm worried." Cole squeezed her hand gently, then released it and stepped back before he could do something foolish like pull her into his arms and kiss her the way he had been wanting to kiss her for days now. "I will be back before you know it. Take care of yourself." He rode out an hour later with Tom and a posse of 6 men from town, following the trail of the Murphy gang westward into the high country where the Mogollon Mountains rose up in a tumble of pine and granite. The trail was not hard to follow. The outlaws were making no effort to hide their passage, which suggested they either felt supremely confident or supremely desperate. Cole was betting on the latter, which made them even more dangerous than usual. They tracked the gang for 3 days through increasingly rough terrain, finding the remains of their camps and the carcasses of the cattle they had slaughtered for food. On the afternoon of the 4th day, they finally caught up with the outlaws at an old trapper's cabin in a narrow canyon, the perfect place for an ambush if Cole had not been expecting something exactly like this. He split the posse into 2 groups, sending Tom and 3 men around to come at the cabin from the rear, while he and the others approached from the front. The plan was to box the gang in and force them to surrender, but as with most plans involving desperate men and loaded guns, things went wrong almost immediately. One of the outlaws spotted them coming and opened fire from the cabin window, and suddenly the canyon was full of the sound of gunfire echoing off the rock walls. Cole took cover behind a fallen log and returned fire, trying to pick out targets in the confusion while keeping track of his men. He saw Tom and the others closing in from the back and allowed himself a moment of hope that they might end this without anyone getting killed. Then Sean Murphy burst out of the cabin's rear door with a shotgun in his hands and nearly took Tom's head off before Cole could line up a shot and drop him with a bullet through the chest. The rest of the gang tried to fight their way out after that, but they were outnumbered and outgunned, and within minutes, it was over. Jack Murphy lay dead in the doorway of the cabin with 3 bullets in him, his brother beside him, and the other 3 outlaws were wounded but alive and in custody. Cole stood in the sudden silence that followed the gunfight and felt nothing but a bone-deep weariness. He had done his job, had brought the Murphy gang to justice at last, but the victory tasted like ashes in his mouth. All he could think about was getting back to the ranch, back to Katherine, back to the warmth and laughter and sense of home that he had found in her company over the past 2 weeks. They brought the prisoners and the bodies back to Silver City the next day and spent another full day dealing with the aftermath. Statements and paperwork and explanations for the federal marshal who arrived from Santa Fe to take custody of the surviving gang members. By the time Cole finally rode back out to his ranch 3 days after leaving it, he was exhausted and sore, and wanted nothing more than a hot meal and a soft bed. What he got instead was Katherine running out of the house as soon as she heard his horse in the yard, her face alight with relief and something else that made his heart pound in his chest. She did not say anything, just threw her arms around him as soon as his feet hit the ground, holding him tight while he stood there with his arms slowly coming up to embrace her in return. "You are back," she said into his shirt, her voice muffled. "You are really back. I was so worried." "I promised I would be," Cole said, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling something settle into place deep inside him. "Did you doubt me?" "Every single day," Katherine admitted, pulling back just far enough to look up at him. "But you are here now, and you are safe, and that is all that matters." Cole looked down at her, at the tears shining in her green eyes and the way she was holding on to him like she was afraid he might disappear, and knew with sudden, absolute certainty that he was in love with her. He had probably been in love with her since the moment he cut her loose from that chair in the abandoned shack, if he was being completely honest with himself. But knowing it now, feeling it with this crystalline clarity, was both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Kate," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, unplanned and unpolished, but true in a way that made his chest ache. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, and I know you have been through hell and probably need time before you are ready for anything like this, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. You have become important to me, more important than anything else in my life, and I needed you to know that." Katherine stared up at him, her lips parted in surprise, her eyes searching his face. "Cole," she whispered, "I thought I was imagining it. I thought maybe it was just gratitude or some kind of misplaced attachment because you saved my life. But it is not that, is it? It is real." "It is real for me," Cole confirmed. "But Kate, I will not pressure you. If you need time, if you need space, if you need me to keep my distance until you figure out what you want, I will do that. Your comfort and well-being matter more to me than anything else." "I do not want you to keep your distance," Katherine said, and now she was smiling, a brilliant, joyful smile that transformed her entire face. "I am falling in love with you too, Cole Walker. I think I started falling the moment you held that canteen to my lips and told me I was going to be all right. No one has ever made me feel as safe as you do, as seen and valued and cherished. I do not need time to figure out what I want. I want you. I want this. I want whatever future we can build together." Cole felt like his heart might burst out of his chest. "Are you sure? Kate, I am a lawman. It is a dangerous job, and there will be times when I have to ride out and leave you wondering if I am coming back. I cannot promise you a life of ease and comfort." "I do not want ease and comfort," Katherine said firmly. "I want a life of meaning and purpose with a man I love and respect. I want to build something real, something that matters, and I want to do it with you." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle and certain. "Kiss me, Cole. Please." Cole needed no further encouragement. He lowered his head and captured her lips with his own, kissing her with all the pent-up longing and tenderness he had been holding back for weeks. Katherine kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms sliding around his neck, her body pressing against his in a way that made him forget everything else but the taste of her mouth and the feel of her in his arms. They stood there in the ranch yard, kissing like teenagers until Maria's pointed cough from the porch reminded them that they had an audience. "Perhaps you two should come inside," Maria called out, but her voice was warm with approval and her eyes were twinkling with delight. "I have made supper, and you can continue this conversation in private." Cole and Katherine broke apart, both of them flushed and breathless, and Cole found himself grinning like a fool. "Yes, Maria. Thank you, Maria." They ate dinner in the kitchen with Maria fussing over them both and making pointed comments in Spanish about weddings and grandchildren that made Katherine blush and Cole choke on his coffee. After the meal, Cole and Katherine retreated to the porch again, drawn by the privacy and the beauty of the night sky stretched out above them like a blanket studded with diamonds. "I want to court you properly," Cole said, taking Katherine's hand and lacing their fingers together. "I know we have already said we love each other, but you deserve to be wooed, Kate. You deserve flowers and poetry and all the things a woman should have when a man is trying to win her heart." "You have already won my heart," Katherine said, "but I will not object to being courted if that is what you want. When do we start?" "How about right now?" Cole pulled her closer, tucking her against his side as they sat together on the porch swing his father had built for his mother 40 years ago. "Tell me more about this dream of yours to open a school. What would it look like? Where would it be?" Katherine settled against him with a contented sigh and began to talk, painting a picture of a school that would be open to all children regardless of their ability to pay, where girls would learn mathematics and science alongside reading and writing, where the emphasis would be on critical thinking and practical skills rather than rote memorization. As she spoke, Cole could see it taking shape in his mind. A small building on the edge of town, maybe a converted house or barn, with Katherine at the center of it all, shaping young minds and changing lives. "It sounds perfect," he said when she finished, "and I want to help you make it happen. We could use some of the ranch profits to fund it, at least at the start, and I know plenty of people in Silver City who would support a venture like that." "Cole, I cannot ask you to do that," Katherine protested. "It is my dream, not yours." Your dreams are my dreams now, Cole said simply. That is what love means, is it not? Supporting each other, helping each other achieve the things that matter most. Besides, I think Silver City could use a school like the one you are describing. Too many children here never get a proper education because their families cannot afford it or because the current school does not meet their needs. You could change that. Katherine was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. You really believe in me, do you not? You truly think I can do this? I know you can, Cole said with absolute conviction. You are one of the strongest, most determined people I have ever met, Kate. You survived being left for dead in the desert. You faced down your worst fears and came out the other side. Opening a school is going to be a walk in the park compared to that. Katherine laughed shakily and wiped at her eyes. When you put it that way, I suppose you are right. She turned to look at him, her expression serious. Cole, I need you to understand something. I am not a delicate flower who needs to be protected from the world. What happened with the Murphy gang was terrible, but it does not define me. I am still the same woman I was before, the same woman who learned to ride and rope on her father's farm, who put herself through teacher's college and made her own way in the world. I do not want you to see me as someone who needs rescuing. I do not see you that way, Cole assured her. I see you as someone who was in a bad situation and got herself out of it with strength and courage. I see you as someone who knows her own mind and goes after what she wants. And I see you as my equal, Kate, in every way that matters. I would never try to diminish you or cage you. That is not what love looks like. Good, Katherine said, satisfied, because I would hate to have to shoot you. Cole blinked in surprise, then burst out laughing when he saw the mischievous glint in her eyes. Duly noted. I will endeavor to stay on your good side. They sat together on the porch until the stars began to wheel overhead toward midnight, talking and dreaming and occasionally kissing with a sweetness that made Cole's chest ache. When they finally said goodnight and went to their separate rooms, Cole lay awake for a long time thinking about the future he could now see stretching out before him. A future that included Katherine by his side not just for a few weeks but for years, for decades, for the rest of his life if she would have him. The next few months passed in a blur of activity and happiness, unlike anything Cole had experienced in his adult life. Katherine took the teaching position at the Silver City School and quickly became beloved by her students and their families, bringing the same intelligence and dedication to her work that she brought to everything else. In the evenings, she would return to the ranch, and she and Cole would have dinner with Maria, then sit together on the porch and talk about their days. Cole proposed on a cool evening in late October, getting down on one knee in the parlor with his grandmother's ring in his hand and his heart in his throat. Katherine said yes before he could even finish asking the question, throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him soundly while Maria cheered from the doorway. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the church in Silver City, with half the town in attendance, and Katherine radiant in a cream-colored dress that Maria had sewn for her. The wedding night was everything Cole had dreamed of and more, Katherine coming to him with a mixture of nervousness and eagerness that melted into passion as they learned each other's bodies in the big bed that had belonged to his parents. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness and made whispered promises about the future, about the children they would have, and the life they would build. True to his word, Cole helped Katherine establish her school the following spring, using ranch profits and money raised from supporters in town to convert an old store building into a bright, welcoming classroom space. The Kate Walker Academy for Young Scholars opened its doors in April of 1883 with 20 students and a mission to provide quality education to any child who wanted it, regardless of their family's financial situation. Katherine threw herself into the work with characteristic determination, and within a year the school had a waiting list and was being talked about as far away as Santa Fe as a model for frontier education. Cole continued his work as a marshal, though he found himself taking fewer long tracking jobs and spending more time in Silver City and at the ranch. He told himself it was because the territory was becoming more settled, and there was less need for the kind of extended manhunts that had defined his earlier career. But the truth was that he simply did not want to be away from Katherine for long stretches anymore. She was his home now, his anchor, and every day he spent with her only deepened his love and admiration for the woman she was. Their first child, a boy they named Matthew, was born in January of 1884, arriving in the middle of a winter storm that left 3 feet of snow on the ground and nearly prevented Doc Harrison from making it to the ranch in time. Katherine labored for 16 hours, and Cole stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. When Matthew finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Cole wept openly at the sight of his son and his wife, both of them alive and healthy and more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. Being a father was harder than tracking outlaws and more rewarding than any arrest Cole had ever made. He loved the weight of his son in his arms, the smell of his hair, the way Matthew would quiet when Cole sang him the old cowboy songs his own father had sung to him. Katherine was a natural mother, patient and loving and determined that their children would grow up knowing they were valued and supported in whatever they chose to do. A second child, a daughter named Margaret after Katherine's older sister, came along in 1886, followed by another son, James, in 1888. The house that had once seemed too large and empty for just Cole and Maria was now full of laughter and noise and the controlled chaos of family life. Cole found that he did not mind the mess or the late nights or the constant demands on his time and attention. This was what he had been missing all those years when he was riding alone after outlaws, the sense of belonging and purpose that came from being part of something larger than himself. In 1890, Cole was offered the position of territorial marshal, a prestigious job that would have required moving the family to Santa Fe and spending most of his time dealing with politics rather than actual law enforcement. He turned it down without hesitation, much to the surprise of his colleagues, but Katherine understood completely. Their life was in Silver City, with the ranch and the school and the community they had worked so hard to build. Neither of them had any desire to trade that for the dubious benefits of a fancier title. Katherine's school continued to thrive, expanding to include a lending library and a program for adult education that helped new immigrants learn English and gain the skills they needed to succeed in their adopted country. She published articles about education reform in territorial newspapers and became known as a voice for progressive ideas about teaching and learning. Cole was fiercely proud of her accomplishments, though he worried sometimes about the toll the work took on her, the long hours and constant demands that left her exhausted at the end of each day. "I am fine," she would insist when he expressed concern, usually while he was rubbing her sore shoulders after the children were in bed. "This is what I was meant to do, Cole. Teaching these children, making a difference in their lives, it matters. I cannot imagine doing anything else." "I know," Cole would say. "I just want to make sure you are taking care of yourself too. You are no good to anyone if you run yourself into the ground." "I have you to make sure that does not happen," Katherine would reply, turning to kiss him softly. "You and Maria and our beautiful children. I have everything I need right here." As the years passed, Cole gradually reduced his duties as marshal and began spending more time working the ranch, which had grown considerably with the addition of new acreage and a larger herd of cattle. Matthew, now a teenager, showed a keen interest in ranching and spent every spare moment learning from his father, while Margaret was clearly following in her mother's footsteps with her love of books and learning. Young James was still finding his way, but at 6 years old he showed signs of having his father's sense of justice and his mother's stubborn determination. In the summer of 1895, the territorial governor came to Silver City to give a speech and specifically requested a meeting with Cole and Katherine, wanting to hear about their work and the impact they were having on the community. The governor spent an hour at the school watching Katherine teach, and another hour at the ranch talking with Cole about law enforcement and the changing face of the territory. Before he left, he shook both their hands and told them they were exactly the kind of citizens that New Mexico needed, the kind of people who built communities rather than just living in them. After the governor left, Cole and Katherine stood together on the porch watching the dust from his carriage settle on the road, And Cole found himself thinking about that day 13 years ago when he had kicked open the door of that abandoned shack and found Katherine tied to a chair, more dead than alive. He thought about how easily things could have gone differently, how close he had come to never meeting this remarkable woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine asked, leaning into his side in the comfortable way of long-married couples. "About how lucky I am," Cole said honestly. "About how different my life would be if I had not found you that day." "You saved my life," Katherine said. "But I think maybe I saved yours too in a different way. You were so alone when I met you, Cole, so closed off from anything resembling joy or connection. I am glad we found each other." "So am I," Cole said, pulling her closer and pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "So am I." 2 more children arrived in the following years, twins born in 1897 that Katherine named Samuel and Rose. The twins were a handful from the start, energetic and mischievous and utterly devoted to each other in a way that reminded Cole of stories his father had told about him and his own twin brother who had died young. The house was now bursting at the seams with 5 children ranging from toddlers to teenagers, and Cole and Katherine talked seriously about building an addition to accommodate their growing family. In 1899, Cole finally retired from his position as marshal, turning over his badge to his former deputy Tom Bradley and officially becoming a full-time rancher. It was a bittersweet moment, the end of an era, but Cole found that he had no regrets. He had spent more than 20 years enforcing the law and bringing outlaws to justice, and he was proud of that work. But he was even prouder of what he and Katherine had built together: a family, a home, a legacy that would outlast them both. Katherine continued teaching until 1902, when she finally agreed to step back from the day-to-day operations of the school and focus on training the next generation of teachers. She remained involved with the school's board of directors and continued to advocate for education reform at the territorial level. But she was able to spend more time at home with the younger children and with Cole, who was increasingly grateful for every moment they had together. They were sitting on the porch one evening in the spring of 1903, watching the sun set over the mountains and listening to the sounds of their children playing in the yard, when Katherine turned to Cole with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about that shack where you found me?" she asked. "About how different things could have been?" "Sometimes," Cole admitted. "Usually when I'm counting my blessings and trying to figure out what I did to deserve this life." "I went back there once," Katherine said quietly, "about 5 years ago when you were away on business. I rode out with Maria and we found that old shack, or what was left of it. Most of it had collapsed, just rotting wood and rusted metal. I stood there looking at it and trying to remember what it felt like to be that terrified woman tied to a chair, certain she was going to die. And you know what I realized?" "What?" Cole asked, taking her hand. "That she did die, in a way. The woman I was before you found me, she died in that shack, and the woman who emerged, the woman I became with your love and support, she is someone stronger and braver and more complete than I ever could have been on my own. So in a strange way, I am grateful for what happened, not for the suffering, but for what came after, for you, and for this life we have built together." Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. After more than 20 years of marriage, Katherine could still surprise him with the depth of her wisdom and the generosity of her spirit. "I am the one who should be grateful," he said roughly. "You gave me a reason to come home, Kate. You gave me a reason to be more than just a man with a gun and a badge. You made me a husband and a father and a better person than I ever thought I could be." "We did that for each other," Katherine said, squeezing his hand. "That is what love is supposed to do. It makes us more than we were alone." They sat together in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, watching their children play and feeling the deep contentment that comes from a life well lived and a love well honored. The years would bring more changes and challenges, more joy and sorrow, but through it all, they would have each other. The foundation they had built on that first day when Cole had cut Katherine loose from her bonds and carried her toward a future neither of them could have imagined. By 1910, their oldest children were grown and starting families of their own. Matthew had married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and was working the Walker Ranch alongside his father, preparing to eventually take it over entirely. Margaret had become a teacher at her mother's school, carrying on Catherine's legacy of progressive education and commitment to serving all children. James had surprised everyone by expressing an interest in medicine and was studying with Doc Harrison, who was now ancient but still sharp as a tack and delighted to finally have an apprentice. The twins, Samuel and Rose, were 13 and showing early signs of the paths they would take. Samuel was already an accomplished horseman with dreams of participating in the rodeo circuit, while Rose had inherited her mother's love of books and her father's sense of justice, announcing her intention to become a lawyer despite the nearly unheard-of nature of female attorneys in the territory. Cole and Katherine, now in their 50s, found themselves entering a new phase of life where the urgent demands of young children had given way to the quieter pleasures of grandparenthood and the satisfaction of watching their legacy take root in the next generation. Matthew and his wife Emily had already blessed them with 2 grandsons, and Margaret was expecting her first child. It was on a cool evening in October of 1910, almost exactly 28 years after Cole had proposed to Katherine, that they found themselves back on the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The children were all either married or staying in town, and Maria had retired to live with her daughter's family, so for the first time in decades, the house was quiet in a way it had not been since before Katherine moved in. "It is strange, is it not?" Katherine mused, leaning her head against Cole's shoulder. "We spent so many years with the house full of noise and activity, and now here we are, just the 2 of us again. Sometimes I miss the chaos." "I miss it too," Cole admitted, "but I also like having you to myself again. Do not get me wrong, I love our children more than life itself, but there is something nice about being able to have a conversation without someone interrupting to ask for help with their arithmetic or settling an argument about whose turn it is to feed the chickens. You know, amo." Katherine laughed softly. "True enough. And we have raised good children, Cole. Strong, kind, capable people who are going to make their mark on the world. We should be proud of what we have accomplished." "I am proud," Cole said. "Prouder than I have words to express. But Kate, my greatest accomplishment was not raising those children or building this ranch or bringing outlaws to justice. My greatest accomplishment was convincing you to marry me and then managing not to mess it up for the past 28 years. 29 years since you found me?" Katherine corrected with a smile. "And you did not have to convince me to marry you, Cole Walker. I was yours from the moment you held that canteen to my lips and promised me everything would be all right. You just did not know it yet." "I think I knew it pretty early on," Cole said. "I just was not ready to admit it to myself. You terrified me, Kate. The intensity of what I felt for you, it was like nothing I had ever experienced. I thought I had loved before, but what I felt for Sarah was a pale shadow compared to what I feel for you. You are everything to me. You always have been." Katherine turned to look at him, her green eyes bright in the lamplight spilling from the windows. "You are everything to me, too. My rescuer, my partner, my best friend, the father of my children, the love of my life. I would not trade a single moment of our life together, not even the hard times. Especially not the hard times, because those are the moments that tested us and proved we could weather anything as long as we had each other." Cole cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the lines that time had etched around her eyes and mouth, the silver threads that now streaked her dark hair. She was 51 years old and more beautiful to him now than she had been at 24, because now he knew every inch of her soul as well as her body, knew her strength and courage and capacity for love in a way he could never have understood in those first heady days of courtship. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you for 29 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left. That is the truest thing I know in this world." "I love you too," Katherine whispered. "Always and forever, Cole Walker, always and forever." They kissed there on the porch as the stars emerged overhead and the cool autumn wind whispered through the cottonwoods. 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that would echo through generations. Their children would tell their children about the marshal who had saved the school teacher from certain death, about the love story that had begun in an abandoned shack and grown into something legendary. And their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would walk the land that Cole and Katherine had tended so carefully, would attend schools that bore Katherine's name and honored her vision, would carry forward the values of justice and compassion and steadfast love that their ancestors had embodied. The years continued to roll by, bringing both joy and sorrow, as is the way of life. Doc Harrison passed away in 1912, leaving his practice to James, who had proven himself an excellent physician with his father's calm demeanor and his mother's analytical mind. Matthew took over full operation of the ranch in 1915, allowing Cole to fully retire and spend his days doing exactly what he pleased, which mostly involved spoiling his grandchildren and sitting on the porch with Katherine. Margaret's school continued to thrive, now educating its third generation of students and expanding to include a high school program that prepared young people for college or vocational training. Rose, true to her word, became one of the first female lawyers in New Mexico, admitted to the bar in 1918 and immediately making a name for herself defending the rights of women and children. Samuel achieved his dream of competing in rodeos, winning several championships before settling down to marry and start a horse breeding operation that became known throughout the Southwest. Through it all, Cole and Katherine remained the center of their growing family, the patriarch and matriarch whose love story formed the foundation upon which everything else was built. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1933, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. And when the party was over and everyone had gone home, they sat together on their beloved porch and marveled at the richness of the life they had shared. 50 years, Katherine said wonderingly. She was 75 now, her hair white as snow, and her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes were still the same brilliant green, and her mind as sharp as ever. Half a century, Cole. Can you believe it? Some days I can barely believe any of it, Cole admitted. He was 76 and feeling every year of it in his aching joints and failing eyesight, but his heart was still strong, and his love for the woman beside him had never wavered. When I think about that scared kid who rode into New Mexico territory all those years ago looking for adventure, I can hardly recognize him. You changed everything, Kate. You made me into the man I always wanted to be, but never quite believed I could become. We changed each other, Katherine insisted, as she always did. That is the gift of true partnership, Cole. We each became more than we could have been alone. Cole could not argue with that. He leaned over and kissed her softly, tasting the decades in that kiss, all the passion and tenderness and simple comfort of a love that had been tested by time and found unbreakable. When they finally pulled apart, Katherine was smiling, and Cole felt his heart swell with so much love he thought it might burst. They spent their final years in gentle contentment, watching their family grow and flourish, taking pride in the legacy they had created together. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1937 at the age of 80, and Katherine followed him less than 6 months later, her children gathering around her bed as she took her last breath and whispered Cole's name one final time. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a shared headstone that read simply, Cole Walker, 1857-1937, and Katherine Hayes Walker, 1858-1937, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents, partners in all things. Their love was their legacy. The story of how Cole had found Katherine tied up in that abandoned shack and cut her loose and took her home became family legend, told and retold through the generations that followed. It was a story about rescue and redemption, about finding love in the most unexpected places, about building something beautiful and lasting from the ruins of tragedy. It was a story that reminded their descendants that even in the darkest moments hope could be found, that courage and kindness could change the course of a life, that true love was not just the stuff of fairy tales, but something real and powerful and worth fighting for. And in the quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the stars emerged overhead, it was easy to imagine that somewhere beyond the veil, Cole and Katherine were still sitting together on that old porch swing, hands clasped, hearts joined, their love enduring for all eternity, just as it had endured through more than half a century of life together. They had found each other in violence and terror, but what they built from that foundation was nothing less than a testament to the transformative power of love, a love that had shaped not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them. Their great-grandchildren still worked the Walker Ranch, still attended schools that bore Katherine's name, and carried forward her vision of education for all. Their descendants became doctors and lawyers and teachers and ranchers, carrying forward the values that Cole and Katherine had instilled in their children and their children's children. And when those descendants faced their own trials and tribulations, they would remember the story of the marshal and the school teacher, the cowboy who had found his love tied up in an abandoned shack and had given her not just freedom, but a whole new life full of purpose and joy and enduring love. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth holding up as an example of what could be accomplished when two people found each other against all odds and chose to build something beautiful together. Cole and Katherine Walker had lived their love story with courage and grace, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would echo through the ages, a testament to the simple truth that love, real love, the kind of love that weathers every storm and emerges stronger on the other side, was the most powerful force in the world. And so their story ended not with tragedy or separation, but with triumph, with the knowledge that they had lived fully and loved completely, that they had built something together that would outlast them both, that they had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to Katherine and transformed it into the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to either of them. It was a good ending, a fitting ending, a happily ever after that they had earned through decades of devotion and partnership and unwavering commitment to each other and to the life they had chosen to build. The abandoned shack where Cole had found Katherine had long since crumbled into dust, reclaimed by the desert that had nearly claimed Katherine's life all those years ago. But the home they had built together still stood, still sheltered their descendants, still rang with laughter and love, and the echoes of the story that had begun there when a cowboy had cut loose a captive woman and offered her not just rescue but redemption, not just safety but love, not just survival, but a chance to truly live. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift either of them could have asked for. A life lived fully in partnership with the person they loved most in all the world. A love that had begun in darkness but had blazed like the sun for more than 50 years, illuminating everything it touched and leaving the world a better place than it had been before. Their love had been tested by hardship and danger, by the everyday challenges of raising a family and building a life on the frontier, by illness and loss and all the other trials that time inevitably brings. But through it all, Cole and Katherine had held fast to each other, had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, partnership over isolation. They had shown their children and grandchildren what it meant to love truly and completely, what it meant to build a life of meaning and purpose together, what it meant to face the world as a united front. And in the end, that was their true legacy. Not the ranch or the school or the material things they left behind, but the example they set of what love could be when two people committed themselves wholly to each other and to the life they were building together. It was an example that would inspire generations, a love story for the ages, a testament to the enduring power of hope and redemption, and the simple choice to open one's heart to another person even in the aftermath of trauma and pain. Cole Walker had been a good lawman, a successful rancher, a devoted father and grandfather. But his greatest role, the one that defined him more than any other, was as Katherine's husband, her partner, her best friend, and truest love. And Katherine Hayes Walker had been many things: a teacher, an education reformer, a mother and grandmother and community leader. But at her core, she was Cole's wife. his equal in all things, the woman who had transformed his life just as surely as he had saved hers. Together they had written a love story that would be remembered long after they were gone, a story that proved that even in the darkest moments, when hope seemed lost and death seemed certain, love could find a way. Love could save a life, could transform a tragedy into a triumph, could take two broken people and make them whole. That was the magic of what Cole and Katherine had found together, the miracle that had begun in an abandoned shack in the New Mexico desert and had grown into something beautiful and enduring and absolutely perfectly right.